Have you ever helped someone without realizing that person was hiding a truth capable of changing everything? Think about that for a moment. We often find ourselves reaching out almost instinctively, driven solely by empathy, expecting nothing in return. But what if behind that simple gesture there was a story capable of transforming not only the life of the recipient, but also that of the one offering the help? It's precisely this kind of event that reveals the power of acts of kindness and shows how in an instant our choices can connect us to hidden truths that completely change our perception of the world. Imagine the scene: a busy hospital, crowded hallways, patients waiting, professionals racing against time. Amidst all this, a nurse catches sight of a homeless man, frail, with visible marks of the hard life he endured. To many, he was just another face forgotten by society, someone who would easily go unnoticed. But to her, there was something different, something that couldn't be ignored. Have you ever experienced this, that moment when your heart speaks louder than your head? The decision to help may seem small, almost natural, but it carries enormous weight. That nurse didn't know it, but she was about to become part of a surprising story where compassion would be the key to revealing an unexpected identity. And what you'll discover now may surprise you. Because often, the truth hides exactly where we least expect it. Behind the scenes of pain, in the simple appearance of someone carrying a secret bigger than they appear. What makes this kind of story so powerful is that it reminds us of something essential. We all have layers, scars, and journeys that the eye doesn't see at first glance. Kindness, when born genuinely, requires no prerequisites. It doesn't ask who a person is, where they come from, or what they've done in the past. It simply acts because it understands that life is too fragile to expect guarantees. And this attitude opens space for discoveries that shake our mindset and lead us to reflect on the true impact of our choices. Stay with me until the end, because this story goes beyond a simple act of solidarity. It's about transformation, about how a seemingly simple decision can trigger unexpected revelations. Have you ever imagined what it would be like if, while helping someone who seemed to have nothing, you discovered that they held a story capable of inspiring a multitude? As we walk through this story together, I want you to put yourself in the nurse's shoes. Think about the times you passed someone on the street and wondered, should I help or move on? It's in these moments that not only character is defined, but also the course of situations that can mark lives forever. This is the beauty of inspiring human stories. They emerge silently, in almost invisible gestures, but they carry the power to resonate far beyond that moment. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what was about to happen inside that hospital wasn't just an encounter between a healthcare professional and a vulnerable man. It was the beginning of a revelation no one in that room could have imagined. One of those truths that leaves us speechless and makes us question everything we thought we knew about empathy, destiny, and the inner workings of life. Inside that hospital, every detail seemed ordinary, yet simultaneously charged with something greater. The nurse's gesture could have been seen as routine. After all, caring was part of her profession. But there was something different in that gaze, a care that went beyond medical records and clinical protocols. She saw not just a patient, but a human being who deserved dignity, respect, and empathy, even when everyone else had already turned away. This is the point we often forget. True kindness lies not only in what we do, but in how we see others. And this is where I want to open up space for you. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what has touched you most so far in this story. It could be a memory, an opinion, or even a similar experience you've had. Sharing this not only creates a space for connection between us, but also helps others who read it realize they're not alone in their reflections. And since we're talking about bonding, I need to tell you something. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this kind of content. When you like the video, YouTube understands the relevance of this topic and delivers it to more people who might need a message of hope like this. And when you subscribe, you ensure you'll always receive stories like this, full of impact, emotion, and truth. It's as if you've become part of this journey with me, helping to spread more empathy around the world. But I don't want this to sound like a distant request, because it's actually a heartfelt invitation. If this narrative has awakened something in you so far, if it made you reflect or feel something different, your interaction is the fuel that keeps this project alive. That's why every comment, every like, and every new subscription makes such a difference, because it transforms this space into a community of people who believe that kindness can indeed change destinies. And while you're thinking about this, remember that the story is just beginning. Because what would happen next in that hospital wasn't just a routine medical procedure, but a revelation that would shake everyone present, proving that small gestures can carry much greater truths than we imagine. The hospital corridor was filled with the hurried sound of footsteps, the constant beeping of monitors, and the buzz of conversations between patients and caregivers. It was an ordinary day for those who worked there, but for those who arrived seeking help, every detail became enormous. Among so many faces, there was one that caught the eye, that of the nurse who, despite her rush, maintained an attentive gaze, able to see far beyond the charts and diagnoses. Her expression bore a mixture of exhaustion and dedication, that expression typical of someone living between sleepless nights and the responsibility of caring for lives. However, there was something that set her apart. While many saw only numbers and names on files, she saw stories. With her apron already stained from her intense routine and her hair hastily tied back, she walked from bed to bed, offering not only technical care but also words of comfort. The touch of her hand, even when simply adjusting a blanket, conveyed more than professionalism. It conveyed humanity. And it is in this almost invisible detail that lies the greatness of those who choose to serve others. It's not about the gesture itself, but about the heart poured into it. Have you ever noticed how, often, a sincere look can soothe more than any medicine? That day, amidst so many tasks, something different caught her attention. It wasn't the insistent alarm of a monitor, nor the rush of doctors crossing the hallways, but rather the figure of a man who seemed completely out of place in the surroundings. His clothes were worn, his beard unkempt, and his eyes carried a weight indescribable. It was clear that it wasn't just physical health that brought him here, but a lifetime marked by abandonment, pain, and invisibility. While many looked away, the nurse stopped. It was in that moment that her mindset made all the difference. Instead of seeing just a homeless person, she saw a person who still deserved care, dignity, and above all, respect. This contrast between the hustle and bustle of the hospital and the man's heavy silence created an almost symbolic atmosphere. It was as if, in that moment, the world was crying out for someone to step up and break the cycle of indifference. And she decided to heed that call. Without judgment, without hesitation, driven solely by compassion, she began treating him with the same dedication she gave any other patient. Perhaps many around her didn't understand the magnitude of that attitude, but this is the kind of decision that changes entire stories without anyone noticing immediately. It's curious how small choices can become powerful revelations. With each gesture from the nurse, the man seemed to react subtly, as if this unexpected attention awakened something dormant within him. What, for her, was just another act of kindness, for him could be the first spark of hope in a long time. How often do we miss opportunities to transform someone with a word, a gesture, or even a simple smile? Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the way this woman conducted that encounter went beyond what's expected in a hospital. It wasn't just about fulfilling a role, but about seeing the truth hidden behind appearances, about realizing that dignity doesn't depend on social status, but on humanity. And that's precisely where true transformation begins. When someone has the courage to act against the world's coldness and chooses to offer care, even when no one else sees value in the recipient. Comment there. That makes sense to me. She was walking for a brief break between appointments, a rare occurrence in her hectic routine, when her eyes were drawn to a scene that seemed to silently cry out for help. Near the hospital's side entrance, sitting on the cold ground, was a man who, at first glance, many would have considered just another homeless person. His clothes were torn, his hunched body conveyed weakness, and his gaze, lost in some undefined spot, revealed a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. The morning wind blew strongly, and yet no one stopped to offer a blanket or even a word of comfort. On the contrary, many looked away, others changed sidewalks, as if his presence were an uncomfortable reminder of a reality they preferred to ignore. The nurse, however, couldn't simply move on. There was something about that man that challenged her to see beyond appearances. She knew, like few others, that behind every frail body lay a story filled with pain, decisions, and often injustice. The contrast was stark. Inside the hospital, hundreds of patients received care, diagnoses, and medication. Outside, someone clearly in need was treated as if invisible. This paradox struck her hard, and it was at that moment that her compassionate mindset spoke louder than any protocol. She approached slowly, respecting that fragile space, and asked something simple. "Are you okay?" The man looked up with a mixture of surprise and distrust, as if unaccustomed to being seen, much less treated with dignity. It was clear that people, for the most part, passed him by, without even acknowledging his existence. This small question, banal to many, was like a spark of humanity amidst grey days. And it's curious to think how such simple words can carry such a profound impact. Have you ever experienced a situation where an unexpected gesture completely changed the way you felt? The nurse, upon noticing his weakened condition, immediately understood that she couldn't ignore it. The attentive gaze of someone accustomed to identifying signs of physical danger showed her that the fever, labored breathing, and fragile posture betrayed more than hunger. Something serious was happening. And in that moment, it wasn't just a matter of technique, but of empathy. What drove her decision wasn't just the knowledge acquired over years of work, but the conscious choice to treat this man as someone who still deserved care, even when the world seemed to have given up on him. While some people watched from afar, muttering criticism or simply quickening their pace, she reached out and offered help, and this is where the revelation begins to take shape. Kindness isn't always understood the moment it happens. Often, it even seems irrational to the onlooker because it defies the cold logic of indifference. But that's the point. True kindness isn't justified by the approval of others. It manifests because it's the right thing to do. This unexpected encounter holds more than just a scene between a nurse and a homeless man. It reveals the power of a simple decision capable of opening doors to greater transformation. What seemed like just another forgotten person on the margins of society would become the starting point for a surprising story, one no one there could have foreseen. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when we choose to see beyond appearances, we discover hidden truths that can change not only the fate of the recipient, but also of the one offering the gesture of compassion. Right there. I'm on this journey too. She stood still for a few seconds, observing the weakened man before her. Her heart raced, as if waging an internal battle. On one side, the rational voice told her that her responsibility lay on the other side of the hospital doors, with registered patients, files, protocols, and clear diagnoses. On the other, a silent dilemma echoed in her mind. What if that man were in immediate danger, with no time to wait? How often does life present us with choices that seem small but carry the weight of eternity? This was one of those moments. The nurse felt it wasn't just a coincidence, but a call to act beyond the cold rules of the system. Compassion spoke louder, as if driving each step toward that stranger. It was impossible to ignore the contrast between the indifference of the passerby and the pain he expressed. There were no screams, no insistent pleas, just a frail, silent body begging for help with what little strength remained. She knew that by approaching, she could find herself in a complex situation, perhaps even criticized by colleagues or superiors. But in that moment, the decision ceased to be about personal risk and became about humanity. True transformation doesn't happen in moments of comfort, but when we choose to do something no one else is willing to do. The dilemma wasn't just hers, it was, in a way, the dilemma of everyone passing by, to help or to turn a blind eye. How many times have we witnessed a scene where we could have reached out, but chose to believe it wasn't our responsibility? This hidden truth is disturbing because it reminds us that every decision, even the one to not act, has an impact. The nurse took a deep breath and realized that her hesitation only existed because she was about to cross a line between obligation and genuine compassion. And it was precisely at that point that she understood. The difference between fulfilling a role and transforming a life lies in the simple act of choosing to care. She knelt before him and, despite the strange looks of some passers-by, placed her hand on his shoulder. It was a small gesture, but loaded with meaning. He looked at her with a mixture of surprise and relief, as if rediscovering the value of being noticed. This moment wasn't just a chance encounter. It was a revelation about how our decisions shape destinies, and suddenly the doubt vanished. She knew she had made the right choice, even if she had no idea of the consequences that would follow. The silent dilemma transformed into an active decision, a courageous mindset, a gesture that seemed simple but carried an incalculable impact. What many saw as just another homeless person, she began to see as someone deserving of respect, dignity, and above all, care. It was as if, in that moment, she had crossed an invisible line that separates apathy from true empathy. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when someone decides to act out of compassion, surprising truths begin to be revealed, changing not only the future of the person being helped, but also of those who decide to help. Comment there. That makes sense to me. She knew that this encounter couldn't end with just a look of compassion. The dilemma had already been overcome, but now came the most challenging part, transforming empathy into concrete action. The nurse took a deep breath, opened her bag, and pulled out a bottle of water she usually carried on long shifts. She handed it to the man who, with trembling hands, held it as if it were a treasure. The first sip seemed to carry not only physical relief, but also a spark of hope, as if that simple gesture were a reminder that there was still humanity in the world. Then she returned to the hospital, got a sandwich from the cafeteria, and brought it to him. When she handed him the food, she offered not only sustenance but also dignity, for she did so looking him in the eye unhurriedly, as if silently saying, "You matter." It was at that moment that the transformation began. The man, accustomed to living invisible, rejected and reduced to a shadow, felt that someone truly saw him. And seeing isn't just perceiving presence, it's recognizing existence. This detail is what differentiates a mechanical gesture from an act of true kindness. As he chewed slowly, discreet tears streamed down his face. They weren't just from satisfied hunger, but from realizing there was still room to believe in the other. But the nurse knew that was only the beginning. The hidden truth lay in his visibly compromised health. Her clinical eye identified signs that could not be ignored: pale skin, irregular breathing, extreme weakness. And, in that moment, compassion combined with professional experience. It was not enough. To offer food and water, a courageous decision was needed. To convince him to enter the hospital. This was no simple gesture of kindness. It was a choice that could completely change that man's fate. Gently, she bent down to speak to him on his level. "You need care, and I can help you. Trust me." Those simple words held the power to open a door he'd kept closed for so long. Fear, distrust, and past wounds had made him refuse help. But the woman's sincere tone caused something inside him to relent. The mindset of those who have experienced rejection is often one of self-protection, of refusing to believe. But faced with such genuine compassion, the wall began to crumble. With effort, he agreed to stand. The nurse supported him firmly, feeling the weight of more than just a tired body, but also an entire journey marked by pain. As they walked toward the hospital, people watched, some surprised, others indifferent, but none of them knew they were witnessing the beginning of a revelation. Behind that simple act of kindness, a much greater truth was about to be revealed, something that would change not only his life, but also the nurses and everyone who witnessed that story. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because what seemed like just an act of common care hid a twist capable of completely transforming the meaning of that scene. Right there. I'm on this journey too. At first, his eyes revealed a mixture of weariness and resistance. It was as if each gesture of kindness was simultaneously a relief and a threat. Relief because it represented care amid so much abandonment, but also a threat because life experience had taught him to be suspicious. The streets shape survival mindsets, creating invisible scars that make it difficult to believe so easily. So, when the nurse insisted on offering help, the man looked at her sideways, as if calculating risks. He accepted the water but took a while to drink it. He took the sandwich but hesitated. Before taking the first bite, as if expecting at any moment a hidden demand, a hidden ulterior motive. His gaze reflected so many stories of rejection he'd carried throughout his journey. Every time someone avoided him on the street, every time a gesture of indifference reminded him he didn't belong, it strengthened an invisible wall. And at that moment, he was still trapped within this fortress of distrust. But the detail was in her manner. The nurse's gaze wasn't one of pity, but of genuine respect. It was disconcerting. It wasn't just the act of giving him food, but the way she remained there, sitting beside him, in no rush to leave, as if saying with her presence, "You are valuable." Little by little, that wall began to break down. He brought the sandwich to his mouth and chewed slowly, his eyes still fixed on hers, testing the sincerity of the gesture. It was then that something shifted. A tear escaped before he could control it, betraying his surprise at such unexpected kindness. It wasn't just about satisfying his hunger, it was about feeling human again. It stirred his deepest emotions, bringing back memories of when he still believed in people, before life became a series of losses and closed doors. The initial reaction, however restrained, already bore signs of transformation. This is how kindness works. It begins as a whisper, an almost imperceptible detail, yet capable of shaking entire structures of pain and disbelief. And it was precisely at that moment That the nurse realized the impact of what was happening went far beyond food and water. She was facing a life that could be saved not only physically, but emotionally. The simple gesture paved the way for something much greater, a hidden truth that no one had imagined. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject because that first reaction of distrust, followed by surprise, revealed that there was much more behind that man than anyone could have imagined. Comment there. That makes sense to me. At that moment, the homeless man held the glass of water with trembling hands, as if afraid it was just a passing illusion. His gaze was torn between distrust and a glimmer of hope that insisted on emerging. The nurse, with her calm posture and sincere smile, didn't pressure him, just remained there, allowing him to understand that her gesture concealed no trap. It was pure, simple, human. This scene alone revealed something powerful. When someone lives on the margins, the first challenge isn't hunger or illness, but the difficulty in believing that goodness still exists in the world. Have you ever noticed how often the greatest barrier we face isn't what's in front of us, but what we carry within? That man's expression bore a history of rejection, scornful looks, and closed doors. Every line on his face told a story of abandonment. But in front of that nurse, something seemed to begin to change. The simple act of accepting the water was more than a physical necessity. It was a trial run to trust again. Little by little, he lifted the glass to his mouth, and with each sip, he seemed to digest not only the drink, but also the idea that there were still people willing to see in him something beyond a label. This is something that makes us reflect. How can such small gestures initiate such profound processes of transformation? The food came next, and with it, the breaking of another layer of resistance. As he chewed slowly, his eyes, which had previously been fixed on the floor, began to rise to meet the nurse's gaze. It was as if he wanted to find confirmation in that gaze that this would not be just another passing situation. And indeed, there was a silent commitment there, to treat with dignity someone who had long since lost sight of what that meant. This contrast between initial reluctance and the surprise of finding compassion reveals a hidden truth about humanity. Behind all resistance, there is almost always a desire to be seen, heard, and cared for. Meanwhile, people passing by watched curiously. Some murmured comments, others simply watched from a distance, unable to comprehend the intensity of what was happening before them. It was as if they were witnessing a scene that was both ordinary and extraordinary. Because, although it was just a woman offering food and water, there was an impact there that transcended the logic of routine. This is the backstage of life's great revelations, when the ordinary becomes extraordinary through the lens of empathy. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because what truly transforms is not just the act itself, but the decision behind it. The nurse could have walked right past it, as so many had done. She could have rationalized, telling herself it wasn't her responsibility, but she chose to act. She chose to let compassion speak louder than indifference. And it was precisely this choice that set off an unexpected journey, one that would change not only that man's life, but also the lives of everyone who came into contact with this story. It is at this point that we understand that often the true impact of an action is measured not only by the immediate result, but by the ripple effect it causes in the collective mind. And you, when you hear this part of the story, can you feel the weight of this choice? Have you ever stopped to think about how many times small gestures could have changed someone's course, maybe even yours? Comment. That makes sense to me, because realizing the value of empathy is recognizing that true transformation begins within us, the moment we decide to act differently. The disapproving looks were like invisible needles piercing her confidence, but the nurse, didn't back down. Within her, there was a flame that burned brighter than any external judgment. While some colleagues whispered in the hallways, commenting that she was wasting time on someone not worth it, she stood firm, knowing that true compassion isn't measured by apparent merit, but by the needs of the sufferer. This internal dilemma, however, wasn't simple. With every step she took toward the fragile man, she felt the weight of carrying two voices within her, the cold voice of institutional reason and the warm voice of the human heart. And perhaps it is precisely in this conflict that the essence of transformation lies. After all, how many times in life do we find ourselves faced with decisions where going with the flow would be easier, but something inside us insists on reminding us that there is a hidden truth, a deeper meaning that cannot be ignored. The nurse understood that helping this man would not only change his day, but also shape his own mindset, because it was in these small gestures that a person's true identity was revealed. The behind-the-scenes nature of hospital life is tough. There, quick decisions, rigid protocols, and constant pressure tend to stifle the humanity that should guide every care. But she chose to look beyond. She saw in the tired face of that homeless man not just an unlikely patient, but a human being with a story. A journey marked by pain, defeat, and perhaps secrets no one could have imagined. This deeper perspective is what differentiates the mere execution of tasks from the true practice of empathy. While others looked away, she approached. Her every gesture seemed to carry not just technique, but meaning, and this disconcerted those who judged her because she exposed an uncomfortable truth. That we often hide behind rules and excuses to avoid engaging with the pain of others. And deep down, we know that this distancing isn't about the other person, but about our inability to deal with the impact that kindness can have on ourselves. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because what was at stake was not just the act of caring, but the revelation of a courageous choice in the face of collective indifference. The nurse knew she might face criticism, she might be seen as someone who didn't know how to separate the personal from the professional, but within her was a greater conviction that in the end, acts of kindness shape not only the lives of those who receive them, but also those who have the courage to offer them. And it is precisely this courage that opens the way to revelations no one expected. Comment there. That makes sense to me. With each gesture the nurse made, something inside the man seemed to be slowly restored. When she took him to take a shower, it wasn't just the grime accumulated from days and nights spent on the street that was draining down the drain, but also some of the pain and shame he silently carried. The warm water beating down on his scarred skin was, in a way, an invitation to dignity, as if to say he still belonged to a world of care and respect. Later, when they offered him clean clothes, the contrast was immediate. They weren't just new fabrics covering his body, but symbols of a new chance, of a transformation that began in the simplest details but had the power to reach the soul. His gaze, previously downcast and dull, took on a restrained, almost shy, yet perceptible glow. The nurse knew that offering food went beyond satisfying hunger. Placing a plate before someone who had grown accustomed to living on the margins was like restoring a piece of humanity that time and the hardships of life had stripped away. Each spoonful seemed to warm not only the stomach, but also the memory of what it was like to be treated with care. Medical treatment then completed this cycle of restoration. By examining his wounds, cleaning cuts, and applying bandages, the healthcare team not only cared for a fragile body, but also sent a silent message. You still matter. Your life has value. This impact was visible not only on him, but also on everyone around him who witnessed the process. The hospital, often seen as a cold space, was instantly transformed into a scene of compassion, where a forgotten human being was reminded of his own dignity. The man began to change not only in appearance, but in his posture, his gestures, and even his way of looking at himself. It was as if this sequence of small acts was deconstructing the layers of rejection he carried and making room for something greater, hope. This transformation came not only from the outside in, but also from the inside out. Feeling the warmth and kindness of someone who chose not to ignore his pain, he began to believe that he could still write a new page in his story. This scene reminds us that true change often begins with simple but consistent gestures that touch deep within our existence. Bathing, clothing, food, and medical care were not just services, but symbols of restoration, of a journey that revealed a framework of compassion capable of changing destinies. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the transformation underway didn't stop at the physical body. There was a hidden truth about to come to light, something no one in that hospital could have imagined, but which carried within it the weight of a revelation that would forever change the perception of everyone who followed that story. Comment there. That makes sense to me. The most impressive change isn't always accompanied by grandiose words or theatrical gestures. Often, it manifests itself in subtle, almost imperceptible details that carry enormous weight. This is exactly what began to happen with that man. The look that once reflected only despair, as if he were lost in a maze with no exit, began to transform into something different. At first, it was just a discreet, almost hidden spark, but with each careful gesture, that spark became a more visible flame. His eyes, previously lowered, avoided looking anyone in the eye, as if eye contact were a burden too heavy to bear. Now, little by little, he began to hold that gaze for a few seconds, as if he were relearning to believe in humanity. His gratitude didn't need to be spoken aloud. It was present in the way he held the offered glass of water more firmly, or in the shy, almost embarrassed smile he gave when someone treated him kindly. Small signs of trust emerged, as if each gesture were a brick, rebuilding a bridge that had been broken long ago. It was as if, in the silence of his soul, he was beginning to understand that there were still people willing to see beyond appearances, beyond the label of homeless. The internal transformation was slow but powerful, and it made it clear that genuine kindness has the power to rekindle what seemed extinguished forever. This process of change reveals something profound. Often, true healing doesn't begin with medication or treatment alone, but with the experience of being seen, recognized, and valued as a human being. The nurse, by treating him with compassion, not only met his physical needs, but also activated a process of emotional reconstruction. And this is what most impressed those who observed that scene. The hidden truth revealed there was not only linked to his identity, but also to the mindset we all carry about how we judge the people we cross paths with. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because the journey unfolding in that hospital wasn't just about a man transforming. It was about bigger revelations, about the impact a simple gesture can have on an entire community, about how seemingly small decisions can create ripples that spread far beyond what we imagine. It was about the power of seeing behind the scenes of someone's life and discovering that often there's a much bigger story behind what meets the eye. Right there, I'm on this journey too. The hospital corridors, always the stage for intense life stories, now became the setting for something even more revealing. As the nurse continued caring for the man, offering him not only medical care but also the dignity he had so often been denied, voices began to rise. Whispered comments echoed like an uncomfortable noise between the white walls. People questioned, some openly, others only with judgmental looks. Why was someone with such street looks receiving so much attention? Wasn't this excessive care for someone who, in their view, had done nothing to deserve it? These words, even though not spoken directly to the man, carried weight. It was as if, even in the face of visible transformation, many preferred to cling to prejudice rather than see the humanity revealed before them. This stance exposed a hidden truth about the mindset of much of society. The difficulty in believing that those who bear visible scars and a history marked by pain also deserve to start over. It was a silent clash between two ways of seeing the world, one that judges by appearances and another that believes in the profound impact of compassion. And in this contrast came a powerful lesson. While some looked on with suspicion, others began to question, are we losing the ability to recognize kindness when it manifests itself before us? The scene provoked an uncomfortable reflection, forcing each person to confront the behind the scenes of their own daily choices and decisions. How many times have we passed by someone in a vulnerable situation and looked away, preferring to believe it didn't concern us? How many times have we failed to extend a hand out of fear, haste, or simply because we didn't believe it would make a difference? Most impressively, in the face of criticism, the nurse didn't back down. On the contrary, her firmness conveyed a clear message. She knew that every act of care could mean much more than any superficial judgment. Her stance became a silent lesson in moral courage, showing that true transformation doesn't happen when we follow the crowd, but when we have the courage to act with compassion, even when it brings disapproving eyes. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because what was at stake here wasn't just one man's recovery, but the revelation of how small actions can expose hidden truths within each of us. It was about the invisible impact of choices, about how the kindness of a single person could deconstruct beliefs, provoke mindset shifts, and even inspire new journeys of empathy. Comment there. That makes sense to me. The hours passed, and with each conversation more signs emerged that this man was not simply someone who had been forgotten by society. There was something different about his posture, the way he surveyed the hospital corridors, as if the environment were familiar to him. His gestures were restrained, his words carried a refined politeness, and even his silence seemed to convey authority. To the nurse who had been there since the beginning, this felt like a hidden truth beginning to reveal itself to everyone. It was unusual to encounter someone on the streets who spoke so clearly, who thanked everyone for their help with almost formal terms, as if molded in another reality, far removed from the one she was currently experiencing. The details caught the attention of the most observant. Some scars on his arms and hands suggested a history of struggle or perhaps some significant accident. His gaze, though haggard, held a firmness, like that of someone who has faced battles far greater than hunger and the cold of the streets. It was as if there were hidden behind that fragile figure a trajectory of impact beginning to take shape between the lines. Those observing him could no longer see him as just some homeless person. He carried an aura of mystery that aroused curiosity and stirred the minds of everyone who crossed his path. The nurse, sensitive and attentive, noticed every nuance. There was a kind of duality about him. While he seemed grateful for a simple meal or a clean blanket, there was a calm that seemed incompatible with misery. It was as if he knew this was just part of the journey, not the final destination. And this silent certainty made those nearby feel something different, almost inexplicable. Some hospital colleagues began to comment, "Have you seen the way he talks? He doesn't sound like someone from the street." Could there be a bigger story behind this? These whispers spread, further heightening the feeling that revelations were about to unfold. And this is where the reflection comes in, how we often judge someone solely by what we see on the surface, without imagining the depth of their story. How many people do we pass daily without realizing that within them may lie a glorious past, difficult decisions, profound losses, or even truths we will never know? This man, who until recently was invisible to everyone who passed through the hospital doors, now raised questions about transformation, about how life can turn upside down in an instant. With every glance, with every uttered sentence, the mystery deepened. It was like watching a film where the behind-the-scenes details are still obscured, but each new detail hints at a grand revelation. And this made not only the nurse, but everyone around her want to closely follow her recovery. Because there was something there, something that went beyond the appearance of abandonment, beyond what could be seen immediately. The impact of this realization began to be felt like a wave. Empathy grew, curiosity increased, and hastily formed judgments began to crumble. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because this story is not just about kindness or compassion, but also about how appearances can hide entire chapters of a life marked by decisions, falls, and twists that no one would imagine. Comment there. That makes sense to me. The days of hospitalization revealed much more than just the man's physical improvement. Each examination performed, each paperwork signed, and each document checked brought with it new pieces of a puzzle no one expected to piece together. What seemed like just another story of abandonment and fragility began to transform into something that moved everyone who followed closely. Between old medical records and forgotten records, the behind-the-scenes story of a completely different life began to surface, making it clear that this man carried a hidden truth capable of changing the way everyone saw him. The nurse, who had been the compassionate link in this journey from the beginning, was the first to realize the gravity of the discovery. The doctors, as they cross-referenced information, were surprised by every detail that emerged. His name was registered in files that didn't match someone abandoned on the streets. There were links to important institutions, records of advanced studies, and even mentions of a promising career that had suddenly disappeared. With each page reviewed, the feeling grew that this was no coincidence or chance. It was as if the impact of that revelation was designed to happen right there, in that hospital, in front of the people who least expected it. This shock brought up profound reflections. How often do we judge someone solely by their appearance in the present moment, without imagining the silent battles, losses, falls, and decisions that led them there? That man's transformation lay not only in his recovering body, but also in the way his story was reinterpreted by everyone around him. He was no longer just the homeless man rescued at the hospital door, but rather an individual with a complex trajectory marked by achievements, pain, and above all, by a choice to disappear from the world's radar. What was most striking was how calm his outlook remained in the face of this revelation. While many were shocked to learn who he had been, he seemed calm, as if he had already accepted that the past didn't need to define his current identity. This attitude aroused even more curiosity and, at the same time, respect. After all, what could have led someone with so many opportunities and socially significant credentials to live on the streets? What painful truths or drastic events could explain such an extreme turn of fate? The quiet conversations in the hallways intensified. Colleagues commented, "This changes everything. I can't believe it was him." The mystery grew, but along with it came inspiration. The nurse understood that the value of what was happening wasn't just about discovering who he had been, but about showing the world the impact of kindness. Her gesture, which might have gone unnoticed, ended up being the trigger for a much larger story to come to light. And it carried a powerful message. Don't underestimate the importance of a simple decision, because it can reveal revelations that transform not just one life, but an entire community. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic, because this unexpected revelation was not the end point, but the beginning of an even broader understanding of compassion, choices, and the true meaning of humanity. Right there. I'm on this journey too. The impact of the revelation spread through the hospital corridors like a rapidly spreading wildfire. Within minutes, all the staff were talking among themselves, and even patients who barely knew the man began to approach, curious. What had previously been just another invisible face on the street now took on a new dimension. He had an identity many could never have imagined. It wasn't just the fact that he had been someone important in the past, but the way the truth clashed with everyone's image of him up until that moment. This contrast between appearance and reality profoundly affected the mindset of those who witnessed the scene. The nurse, who had been the bridge that brought everything to light, carefully observed the reactions around him. There were looks of genuine surprise, expressions of regret for hasty judgments, and even murmurs of shame from those who, days before, had treated him like a nuisance. The hidden truth that was revealed before everyone seemed to teach a collective lesson about empathy and humanity. After all, who are we to define someone's worth solely by what we see at a specific moment in their journey? Comments abounded. How did no one notice before? He was always there, and no one noticed who he really was. This wave of shock was mixed with a silent reflection. How many other people go unnoticed, carrying stories that could completely change the way we see them, if only we stopped to look more closely? This episode laid bare the importance of simple decisions, like that of a nurse who chose to listen to her compassion rather than remain silent in the face of indifference. The man, for his part, seemed indifferent to the commotion around him. He wasn't proud of the revelation, nor was he seeking recognition. His calm, almost resigned demeanor made the crowd's shock even stronger because it contrasted with the serenity of someone who seemed to have already made peace with his past. This attitude further intrigued those present, raising questions about his trajectory and the reasons that led him to that point. The hospital, which until then had been merely a stage for routine care, became a space of revelations and profound reflection. Every glance toward the man seemed to carry a mixture of disbelief and admiration. Many wondered how they would have reacted if they had discovered this truth alone, without witnessing the courage and kindness that opened the doors for it to be known. This collective shock wasn't just about him, but about every single person there. It was as if everyone was being asked to re-evaluate their own choices, their attitudes toward the most vulnerable, and even their conceptions of human worth. The transformation wasn't just about the man receiving care, but also about every mind and heart witnessing the scene. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because the true impact of this revelation wasn't confined to the hospital walls. It echoed beyond, generating a wave of reflections and changes no one could have foreseen. Comment there. That makes sense to me. It's striking to realize how life often chooses moments of apparent simplicity to reveal hidden truths. In that hospital, a simple act of kindness from the nurse transformed into a wave of events no one could have foreseen. She simply followed her conscience, but the impact was so profound that it began to be talked about not only in the hustle and bustle of medical routine, but also beyond. The man, previously seen as someone abandoned by fate, was now the center of attention, not because of his condition, but because of the revelation of his true identity. It was as if every detail of his life had come to light not by chance, but because there was a hidden lesson that needed to be revealed. And that's the fascinating point. When compassion meets the unexpected, destiny changes course. It wasn't just about one patient, it was about a story of transformation, about how a seemingly simple decision, offering care, attention, and dignity can alter not only someone's present, but also the future of everyone who comes into contact with that reality. There was a mixture of surprise and confirmation in the nurse's eyes. Surprise at seeing the depth of the truth revealed, and confirmation that her instinct had been right all along. Have you ever experienced a moment when a single detail completely changed the way you saw someone? Perhaps an attitude, a word, or even an unexpected revelation. It's in these moments that we understand that every human being carries within them hidden depths. That man, once ignored on the streets, now represented a narrative that went far beyond survival. He bore scars that spoke of battles, a refined upbringing that betrayed a significant past, and a gaze that little by little was shining with dignity again. The impact of this revelation wasn't limited to the hospital setting. Patients who had followed the story began to reflect on their own lives. The nurses' colleagues began to question prejudices they'd unwittingly harbored, and even outsiders, upon hearing about the case, saw in it a powerful metaphor for what we all carry: unspoken truths, hidden pains, and forgotten identities. The hidden truth was now before everyone, like a mirror that forced each person to rethink their decisions, their mindsets, and their own way of treating others. And perhaps this is the greatest impact of stories like this, to show that kindness is never in vain. Even when it seems small or wasted, it can be the key that unlocks doors to revelations that were kept hidden in the deepest silence. That man's journey, which began with rejection on the streets and ended with a surprising discovery inside a hospital, is also the journey of each of us. After all, at some point, we all carry hidden identities, internal struggles, and transformations that just await the right moment to be revealed. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject because what happened after this revelation was even more surprising than anyone could have imagined, and it powerfully showed how empathy has the power to rewrite entire destinies. Comment there. That makes sense to me. Small gestures of compassion can change entire destinies. This isn't just a pretty phrase to end a story, but a profound truth revealed in life's most unexpected details. Sometimes, a seemingly simple decision, offering water, a piece of bread, a smile, or just a respectful look, becomes the key that unlocks doors locked for years in someone's heart. How often do we underestimate the power of an attitude, letting haste, fatigue, or even silent judgment prevent us from acting? And yet, life insists on showing us that the power of transformation lies hidden precisely in those moments that almost go unnoticed. The story of this nurse and the homeless man reminds us that no one carries only what we see. Behind worn clothes, a tired face, or a hunched posture, there may be chapters of a journey we don't know. And perhaps by reaching out, we're not only helping someone in need, but also allowing ourselves access to hidden truths, lessons learned, and even revelations that can change our own mindset. Kindness creates invisible but powerful bridges that connect seemingly distant destinations. What happened in that hospital wasn't just an encounter between a professional and an unlikely patient. It was a clash of worlds. On one side, a routine marked by protocols, critical glances, and the rush of everyday life. On the other, a life marked by oblivion, pain, and the scars of abandonment. In the midst of it all, a simple gesture of empathy transformed everything. And it's striking how these moments reveal that the line between indifference and compassion is much thinner than we think. One decision can change everything. Perhaps you've experienced something like this yourself, a moment when, even without knowing why, you decided to help someone, and that choice remains etched in your memory as a turning point. These stories resonate because they confront us with a universal truth. We don't know the weight of each person's struggle, but we always have the chance to alleviate that burden, even if only a little. And deep down, when we do this, it's as if we're also in some way reclaiming forgotten parts of ourselves. It's curious to think about how kindness always leaves its mark, not only on the recipient, but also on those who observe it. Just remember the crowd at the hospital, the comments, the expressions of surprise, the collective shock upon discovering that man's true identity. Everyone who was there left different because they witnessed a gesture that transcended common logic and revealed the essence of humanity. This is the invisible but lasting impact of compassion manifesting itself. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic. What if each of us took responsibility for transforming at least one life around us? Not with grand gestures, not with heroic deeds, but with seemingly small actions that, when added together, become a huge movement. Have you ever thought how this could change the course of a community, an entire city, perhaps even a generation? It's like lighting a flame that spreads and illuminates spaces that were previously plunged into the darkness of indifference. This is the backstage of true transformation. It doesn't begin with millions. It begins with one. One act, one choice, one decision. The power of kindness is silent but relentless. It doesn't demand applause but leaves deep scars. And ultimately, this is the greatest revelation of this story. The nurse may not have realized the magnitude of what she was doing, but her gesture was enough to change destinies. Do you believe that kindness always comes back? Do you think these gestures, even when they go unrecognized, have an impact that goes beyond the immediate? I invite you to share this reflection in the comments. Write, "I believe in kindness." This simple act of writing can become not only a form of engagement, but also a seed planted, a reminder that you have chosen to stand on the side of compassion. Because ultimately, stories like this remind us that we're all part of something bigger, and every action, no matter how small, carries within it the power to resonate far beyond what we imagine. After following this entire story, if you've made it this far, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. It shows that this type of content truly resonates with you, and that's why I continue to share stories like this. So if you feel this message resonated with you in some way, please leave a like. It really helps strengthen this connection between us. And be sure to subscribe to the channel, because with each new video, you'll find reflections and stories that can touch your life in a special way. Oh, and I want to know who really stayed until the end. Right here in the comments. I'm with you until the end. It will be incredible to see our community forming around this idea that kindness transforms destinies. And before you leave, there's a video here that complements this topic.